We know now that we've been given, essentially, government has a zero carbon target, 2050, which we can't meet because it's based on assumptions that aren't real. So we probably have 10 or 15 years at best to mitigate the effects of 2-degree climate change, which is reasonably catastrophic, and we have to do something. If not to make a difference to whether it gets better or not, but for the fact that we have a 7-year-old daughter who has to live through it. I do like the idea of being self-reliant for this stuff. A lot of the power in this country is coming from coal and gas, and the coal stations being wound down. There's no new nuclear coming on stream, even if people really wanted it to. And we've been told in the next 20 years we've got to do without fossil fuels, basically. Well, for power we would have solar, lots of solar panels here, and we have a wind turbine as well, and that's enough to get us through the whole year. We couldn't manage with one or the other, but between the two of them, it's usually either sunny enough or windy enough to keep the batteries charged and keep the lights on. Kind of commonly people say to us, oh, solar's no good in this country. And it's nice to be able to say, well, actually it is. And, a surprising number of people come and have a look, and then they're like, oh, you can do this. And once they see it, they think, oh, I could go and do this myself. So a lot of what we're doing is trying to convince other people that, yeah, you can do it, and it is a good idea.
It's getting there slowly, yeah. Getting better at growing vegetables, just getting the time to do it now. But the orchards are maturing now, we're getting good crops from those, and the hedgerows are maturing, so you can use all the hedgerow things, and planting more, always planting more. We always had a plan for other places, and every so often I go back to the book that I wrote all my notes in and say, where have I got to on my book? And yeah, it's good to revisit what I was thinking of at the time, see how it's working now.
Everyone has this desperate urge to be tidy, but the problem we have, and the problem pollinators have, whether it's bees or whether it's flies or whatever it is that the whole countryside is being tidied. There just aren't these wild areas, and you used to get these in headlands of fields and odd corners that people left alone where this stuff would grow, and it's just not there anymore. And then added to the problem of herbicides and pesticides that are used in agriculture affecting bees, for instance. It's hammering their numbers completely. So part of our system is allowing bits like this, but it's just keeping that balance between the things for them and things for us. So now I don't like there's loads of nettles growing. You'll see lots of nettles growing in the bushes here, and the temptation is to go and cut them all down because that's what we've done. But you look, and then there's ladybirds all over them, and the ladybirds are eating our aphids, and so I just let them be. Unless it's somewhere I need to actually clear to grow a bit of food, or I need it as a path, then generally we just let it all do its thing.
The main thing I find I can grow stuff, but it's keeping it and preserving it is the thing. And growing stuff that we actually eat. So with the tomatoes, we try and make a lot of passata, which is very, very simple. We just keep jars throughout the year for various things. And we're still reusing a few from like 4 years ago. I don't think we're ever going to be 100%. But there is a lot of stuff here you can forage as well. There's a guy called Stephen Barstow who lives in Norway, and he knows all the different plants and stuff, and I'm kind of weeding, thinking, I'm sure I can eat that, and I probably shouldn't be weeding that, but yeah, if I'm desperate, I have food here.
No, go back in there, you daft beggars. That's it. In nature, there are no kind of vegetarian systems. Animals are part of everything. They're eating, which means that they're also pooing, which means that they're fertilising the ground. And chickens especially, they're scratching and they're turning over the ground all the time. So we can put them on an area that, say it's been weedy or we're preparing it, and they'll eat the grass down and they'll dig it over, and then they'll poo in it and fertilise it, and then we can come along, tidy that up and plant into it. You know what? We know they've had a good life. That's the most important thing, animal welfare. Our food is prepared in the garden. There's no food miles attached to it. The footprint of these animals is tiny compared with a commercial animal. Again, we know what they've been fed all their lives as well, you know. Come on.
A few years ago, I thought I had a broccoli pest. There was just bits of broccoli missing all along, and then I realised it was one height. And I came out and I realised it was lyre height. She's just been going around each plant at mouth level. And just whatever she could reach with her mouth, she's been chewing it off when she was about 2. She's funny because we haven't really been anywhere big. She thinks like Bangor's really big. That's like a city to her. Like, even Rathfarn's a city sometimes. No, I don't think she's missing out. I think when she's older and she gets more into, I don't know, teenage things or something, she'll probably be like, why do I live so far from everything and stuff? But sure. I think that Lara will hopefully understand where her food comes from and be able to grow her own food and have the knowledge and how to do her own electronics and welding and wood chopping and chainsawing and basically a practical life. Like, if the whole world computers go down, she can go and chop wood. She can grow her food. She knows what to do. She can save seeds and things like that.
So actually quite a lot of kids are used to the idea that their family grow food in some form. They might not do it on a small scale, but you know, they might be growing 300 acres of potatoes. But they have a connection to food in some way. So there is that. So she's different, but not that different. If she was, you know, if she was going to a school in a very urban area, that would be more noticeable probably.
You made me hurt myself.
At the moment, carbon is the big topic, but extraction, consumerism, you know, deforestation is probably our biggest problem right now. Every day, thousands of square acres of rainforest are disappearing, and it's not only habitat, you know, it's providing us with oxygen.
Taking in all carbon.
And taking in carbon, and we're cutting it down. So a very significant impact, and that's not just because there's lots of people. It's because the rich half of us are using too much stuff. So that's us. Now I want you to think about the way your life works at the moment. Consider for a minute where your electricity, your water and your food come from. What happens to your waste? What do you do if, say, your roof leaks or the power goes off? For the majority of people, all these things are taken care of by other people, and we're completely reliant on distant supply chains and specialists. Less than 100 years ago, that's just 2 generations, none of this was the case here in Ireland. By and large, you provided your own water, shelter, heat, light and food, and most of the things you needed were locally produced. You were fairly resilient in many respects, but over the last century, specialisation has changed all of that. Now let's scroll forwards, say 20 years to 2040, to a point where we're told we must have taken massive actions on a global scale in order to avoid the worst effects of climate change. I'm sure I don't need to tell you about the challenges we're likely to face over the coming years. But the reality is, if we're going to meet the IPCC targets and keep global temperature rises to under 2 degrees, the target's 1.5, but we won't meet that, then you will all have to reduce your energy consumption to less than half what it typically is now. That's half as much for heating, half as much for electricity, half as much to produce and move the food and water that you use. And all of this is before we throw in surprises like coronavirus, with serious threats to supply chains and all the stuff that comes with that. We're already starting to see some effects here, and we can't be sure how it will work out, but I think we'll find out soon enough. Winter, as they say, is coming. So what do we do? One of the things that inspired me greatly is a series of short films called Living in the Future. Google it, it's great. I think it's livinginthefuture.org. What we're doing here at Lackan is exactly that. Welcome to the year 2040. Imagine homes that generated all their own electricity, that are heated entirely by the sun and the wind, and with completely carbon neutral fuel that's grown nearby and provides great habitat for animals. Imagine if those homes cleaned their own dirty grey water and processed their own household waste into amazing compost that helped them to grow food, which as it grew provided more habitat for animals, insects and birds, and cleaned the air around them. Imagine if the homes were made with local natural materials and the people who lived in them had helped to build them so that they had learned skills to help maintain them later on. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't you love to live in a house that provided endless free electricity, heated itself, gave you hot water and was beautiful, helped increase biodiversity and had no net impact on the environment? What would this house of the future look like? Well, I'll show you. Welcome to the future. This is Lackan Cottage Farm. It's a 6-acre off-grid permaculture smallholding that can support up to 3 households. And it does all the things I mentioned just now, using common materials and technology, often for little or no cost, right now in 2020. We'll look at how that happens in a minute, but first I'll explain briefly how I came to be here 20 years in your future with Claire and Lyra. 10 years ago, I had a typically stressful job, mortgage and busy life, and I knew there had to be a better way to live. And by chance I came across Simon Dale's Hobbit house on the internet. It was a home for £3,000. I'll have some of that, I thought, and it looked amazing, and it led me on quite a journey. A year later I'd met Claire, quit my job, gave up the house, walked away and was a volunteer on a community hub, building with Simon Dale at La Masica village. There was no going back. Oh, and we were living in a converted horse truck on a friend's farm. We visited projects, tried varying degrees of off-grid living, like the teepee, and worked out what we wanted and what we didn't want. And then by chance we found Lackan. It was cheap, and we fell in love with it. It was a run-down cottage and a few acres of paddock and some birch woodland. Our rules were fairly simple. It all had to be low cost by necessity because we had no money, reclaimed or local, or all three. One thing we did have was a plan. We'd thought about how we might establish ourselves on a piece of land over 5 years, so providing our basic needs and making a living. So this gave us a good starting point, and I really recommend it as an exercise, even if you don't already have a place. Visioning what we wanted really helped to make it a reality. Basic needs are often quoted as being shelter, water, food and heat, but the reality is that they are what you decide they are. Ours included a comfy bed and a hot bath as non-negotiable. Having those core needs identified really allows you to focus on what needs to be done. So for 4 frantic months we fixed up our house because Lyra was due to be born, and that made life a lot easier down the line. And when we came in tired and filthy from working in the garden or the woods. Yes, we lost a growing season, but we had a base to work from in later years. And here we are now. We've gone in the general direction of our plan and we're pretty well established after 8 years. Something that we always thought about, but which has become more and more important, is the idea of resilience. It's always been there, but the current pandemic has really brought it into focus. Resilience is vital because we've all come to live very fragile lives. Global food supply chains, a national electricity grid and water supplies, the need for specialists for anything to do with our homes, all this has been taken out of our hands. If you need proof, turn off your electric, close the stop tap on your water and try not to shop for a month. It'd be hard, right? What if stuff broke? Could you fix it? Or are you part of a community where someone else could help you fix it? We really need to find ways to be more self-reliant and so resilient. And when I say self-reliant, that might be as an individual or as part of a community. The community is vital to this idea because as a group, we all bring different skills to the party. Currently, most of our systems look like this. Stuff and expertise comes in, we consume it, and stuff goes out. We don't know where it comes from, we don't know where it goes to. It's a linear, open system where there's no connection between the inputs and the outputs. And we need a better system. Firstly, so that we aren't totally reliant on a single source of energy, water, food, expertise, or whatever. And secondly, to create a system of closed loops so that the output or waste from one thing becomes the useful input for another. In permaculture terms, we could say that we want a system that produces no waste, integrates, doesn't segregate, and catches and stores energy. So we are creating systems that are local, decentralized, and that often means being off-grid, at least off the national grids. And we are harnessing the power of free stuff. Some of the best places I've found to find free stuff are Gumtree, FreeCycle, Done Deal, and Facebook Marketplace. And also, don't be afraid to ask people. It's amazing what you can pick up just by asking the question. Let's have a look at how our systems might work together in closed loops, and then I'll pick a couple of examples. Here's a basic look at our sort of web of home, for want of a better word. It's much like the web of life exercise if you've done it. The more connections we can make, the longer the system can keep going if something fails. So my first example is hot water, and it's used to heat our home and for washing. So the first and simplest way is to grow or harvest trees, burn them in a range cooker with a back boiler, so you get cooking, space heating and hot water. And we take advantage of the thermosiphon effect, so that's basically the hot water rises, to move the water to a storage tank without the need for a pump. As long as we have water and fuel, we'll always have cooking, heating and hot water, even if there's no power. It's good all year round, a bit warm in the summer, and I paid about £80 for our range cooker. There's loads of second-hand ones available. The second way, solar thermal. This is basically a set of glass tubes with a copper strip inside that heats up in the sun and transfers the heat to a water pipe. Bingo, hot water. They can be pumped or they can be thermosiphon. And they're good for about 6 months of the year, but they're very efficient and you do get a bit the rest of the year. So we get something over the winter. We got some of ours off FreeCycle and we bought some. The next way we have is using a biomass boiler. And these usually burn pellets, wood chip or logs, and they're incredibly efficient. Far more than the range cooker. And then you can also have them on a timer, so you can have your hot water when you need it, say first thing in the morning or last thing at night or whatever. They are expensive new. Again, we got ours off FreeCycle. There are lots being taken out at the moment because the gas companies are really pushing piped gas and they're offering great deals, so people are taking them out. The last one is solar PV. So as well as providing electricity for the house, it's easy to heat water with an immersion heater, which you've probably already got in your hot water tank. So when there's a surplus of solar, which is quite often here in summer, probably about 9 months of the year we'd get something like that. And you can do the same with wind. We got about half our solar panels, again, actually off a church who were throwing them away because they were upgrading. So there's 4 ways to heat water, and usually at least 2 of them are producing at any one time. And where does the water come from that they heat? Here it's rainwater, stored in low-cost IBC containers, so they're like the plastic cubes with the metal cage around them. Filtered using common filters that we got from Screwfix, and they're pumped, the water's pumped to give the same pressure that you'd get in a main supply. Gravity would also work well here if you had enough slope. And the fuel? Well, for much of the year, the sun and the wind alone produce enough for us. And in winter, we would use coppiced wood, and we're starting to grow willow as well. The output of the range and the biomass boiler is wood ash, and we return that to the garden to help improve the soil. And what about the other outputs from the house? We have green waste from food, our human waste is composted, and then the compost is used to grow food. Our waste grey water from the bath, the sink and the shower goes into a reed bed, and that provides habitat, and that filters the water before it gets to a pond. And that cleans the water again, it provides more habitat, and we can use it to help irrigate our food crops. Lastly, the buildings. Our country is full of old houses, and generally they're made from local natural materials like stone, clay, there's usually wood, thatch roofs. So reusing them can save enormous amounts of resource. We chose to use wood only from the island of Ireland, and we've reused materials wherever possible. It was low cost, and it definitely made us more creative, having a smaller budget. We've also experimented with straw bales, natural plasters and cob. Green roofs are a good example of reducing reliance on external sources and the amount of work, because like the tin roof on our cottage needs painted, which needs paint to be bought and then all the effort of actually painting it. By contrast, our green roof needs no maintenance, and we've got potatoes growing on our porch. I could go on, but hopefully you can see how our future need for autonomous, low impact living can be a reality now in 2020. And you don't need a 6-acre smallholding either. We did it in an old lorry parked in someone else's yard, growing food in pots and builder's bags. You could fit solar PV or hot water. You can harvest rainwater, compost your waste, insulate your home, buy stuff locally, create a pond, grow beans up your fence or potatoes in bags, and get to know your neighbours, form a community. Once you start, you'll be amazed where it takes you, and permaculture is the perfect way to get there. Thank you for listening.